Honorable Lerato.
Thank you, Chairperson. Before I make the remarks I want to make, DG, Sishi, is DDG Mbalo still under the deploy of the department? Is he still DDG Skills Development?
DDG Mbalo has now been appointed as an administrator for LGCTA, and Mr. MZ Ngubane is the acting DDG. He's here with us.
The gentleman at the far end. Oh, Mabuza Ngubane.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm in South Africa. Okay. So we still have a meeting on Friday. Okay. So DG, the reason I'm asking this is because for me, I get annoyed. As a child throughout primary and high school and even university, I hated group projects. I hated them with a passion. And let me tell you why. Because I'm almost a perfectionist. I'm a very hard worker, and I'm a very smart child. I know that about myself. I know that about myself. I hated when, if I'm pulling my socks and I'm putting everything on the table to deliver, that I am in a group with nincompoops who are not showing up. The reason why I'm saying this is because this is not the first time we're having quarterly reports on performances of the department. And every time you come here, the CET branch is forever going to be shining. Mam Puchane is great. She's doing her best in life. She's shining. She should be sipping champagne every day. But then that branch, and then you have the corporate branch that also fairly delivers, right? But then you have the skills branch. DDG Mbalo, God knows what him and the people under him have been doing all along. The same critique I'll give to Mesotlikwa and her control of universities. And the same critique I will give to Ndate Zungu, DHET. For me, that says there isn't synergy around the expectations of performance per unit. You are happy to have Mamfuchane delivering and doing her best, but you're not happy replicating that across all the other branches. And I'm saying this very much aware that she's not doing that alone, because she's not the only person employed within that branch. But surely there's something that she's doing right as far as commanding authority within that unit that the other DDGs have not been doing. And that for me speaks to your lackluster approach in my view, with all due respect. DG, your lackluster approach in holding your DDGs and their units accountable for service delivery. I'm saying this because if my memory serves me well, the targets for the 2024-2025 financial year were a reduction from the previous financial year's targets, because you were complaining to say it's too much work, you don't have capacity, you want to focus, hone in and spend your money properly, therefore you're going to reduce targets and be able to do it. But then, first quarter, second quarter, you are awake, halfway there, you are happy to do a bit of work, and then down the line, your life is miserable, because then there's no morale. Nobody's achieving anything. And even just in the previous financial year alone, quarter one and quarter two, you were there, 80%, 79% performance. Come quarter three, come quarter four, you had 42, 58. And there's nothing particularly difficult about the targets that you had that you were supposed to achieve on. It's just a matter of either you're not planning correctly or people are just chilling and cruising at work for no reason. So that is something that I need you, DM, to have an honest reflection with the minister about. because I'm asking you this because there's nothing about my approach as a member of this committee that I haven't said, and not me alone, members of this committee from the previous administration that have said about targets that is going to be new to the DG's ears that he still needs to apply. When you look at slide 10 of your presentation, as far as the targets on procurement set aside for women, and young people outside of the classification of Black people. In the past, I've again maintained, if you are going to use the same sourcing structure of business that you've used in the years, you're not going to achieve that target. I have said countless times, it is important to have MOUs with other departments, sister ministries, the Department of Labor, Department of Small Business Development, the Department of Trade and Industry. I can go on, even science and innovation. There's a whole lot of departments that exist. You can even extend it to provinces and municipalities to be able to get the targets. And in the previous conversation we've had, there was an undertaking from the DG to do this, but nothing has changed. So I think what's necessary is political will to make sure that you get that right. If you are serious about having women and young people doing business with government in a healthy, non-compromised, absolutely kosher way, then you must be able to exhaust all your avenues and relationships to get that right. So that's one. What I want to understand about your international trips, your international engagements, that's a question for you, DG. What were you doing? What are international engagements? That's a question, DG.
These would be international conventions where, as a country, either through bilateral relations between our counterparts abroad, we enter into agreements on specific matters, which could include scholarship agreements, which could include cooperation in specific areas. An example would be the fact that we have, through Parliament, agreed to deposit the recognition of qualifications. And because of it, we now are part of a global team that leads promotion of scholarship exchange programs amongst our academics and students and lecturers. It would be such.
I hear you. We're on the same page. So of the 16 international, I'm asking because you had 8 planned and you doubled it. You doubled the trips to internationally. We are benchmarking, that's great. I mean, the president did say people must benchmark to learn. That's fine. But what I'm trying to understand is, I'm trying to ascertain 2 things. One, the cost related to this, right? 2, what are the outcomes of these bilaterals? Because I don't have a problem with you attending international trips. I have a problem if there's no value for money, and 2, we're not giving back to the mandate. So what is the 2 highlights of the trips that you, at the top of your head, can say this is what we've done internationally?
Almost, thank you. Almost all our scholarship programs, which have now led to more than 500 young people of South Africa getting scholarships abroad, are actually either partly funded or fully funded by our counterparts abroad.
And so you needed to go abroad to do that. There's no way you could have had a Zoom or conversation. I'm trying to understand, like, what necessitates the travel itself? Make it make sense.
Yeah, the overachievement of
No, thank you. Thank you. I think I would like to present a breakdown of all of this areas of achievement and be specific about each one of them. But I can assure you that in my best knowledge, we are very conservative about traveling. What has constituted traveling in the recent months has been offer by certain countries like China to directly train some of our students and lecturers. For example, we've got hundreds of our lecturers actually being trained, and we are not paying for that. They are actually footing the bill for it. But I think it would make more sense when I present the breakdown of it. Just this month, we've sent hundreds students to China. There are 336 students who are beneficiaries of scholarships that we are sending abroad. Almost 80% of the funding of those students is by our other embassies or the countries who we are with bilaterals with. During the course of these meetings with or doing business with these counterparts, there's a series of meetings which are not necessarily involving trips abroad, which involve them coming to South Africa, and which also involve us having virtual meetings with them. So by the time any traveling happens, generally the people who would be traveling would be the beneficiaries themselves going there. But there are also other international engagements that are not as a result of the department having bilaterals, which are part of the work of DERCO, where multilateral agreements are signed, then we become part of the traveling.
I understand that, DG. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Slide 14, on the 10% completion of construction of the Ulundi satellite campus. So you didn't... So the actual construction had only commenced in March this year, right? And the reason was that there was a delay in the finalization of the transfer of ownership. But the specific reason you give here is that UniZulu didn't have the capacity for the delivery and management of infrastructure. So those are two reasons. One is the delay in the transfer. I don't know, when I sell any of my properties, you sell, there's a lawyer there that does the transfer of documents, a group of attorneys, the buyer signs, or we transfer. It's a simple thing. So at what point do you have a delay of something that who didn't sign what at what time? That's what I'm trying to understand in the first part. The second part that I want to understand is if UniZulu, again, I think part of the remarks that the DM made earlier relates to this. If UniZulu doesn't have the capacity to deliver and manage infrastructure, what happens in that case? So you delay and then you wait until the end. But then this is not the first time you are trying to have construction, anything with UniZulu. You know what the issues with UniZulu are. So why do you still opt for the model of putting it in their hands for completion and not just do it yourself?
Firstly, I think I welcome the proposal in terms of what are the options available to us. But first, I would speak from the point of view of having myself been part last month of the handing over of a complete facility to the University of Zululand in terms of phase one, because we have a new engineering campus in a historically disadvantaged institution that ordinarily would have been known for just programs that are not at that level. We're quite happy with it. But what I have also noted, and that in our package of agreements, we also included not just physical infrastructure, but also facilities. including computers, including other laboratories that are there. Now, what then happened was that you will find that the pace of delivery of the contents is faster than the physical infrastructure that is there, because the institution doesn't have the resources to, on its own, move. Because in the PPP model, they would have partners who, if they no longer come to the party, then it hinders the project. But you are saying, why don't you take over? The model of the department is to identify implementing agents, those implementing agents like DBSA that are linked to government departments, which allows us as a department to monitor and hold accountable such implementing agreements. But when it comes to universities, the challenge is the fact that their autonomy in the running of these projects then delays the interventions of the department. In respect of KZN University, UKZN, University of Zululand University, we also would like to share with you further details. Regarding Department of Public Works, I think we should have been more clearer. The role of Department of Public Works in this regard is just land related, and they are quite efficient in helping us in this. But in the case of the University of Zululand, there was a delay, because by the time we contacted the Public Works, we had started, because our plan was to build the former parliament, the old parliamentary buildings that were there, and we were at advanced stages towards converting existing buildings into this facility. But then they changed their mind at an advanced stage and decided to give us additional land, which then has given us another delay in this regard. But as far as the department is concerned, it would have been very easy to get to a point now where we have implemented this.
Thank you, DG. Chair, thank you for the grace. I have three things that there's a lot actually. Technically, I wish such sessions would last the whole day, but I'll make two comments on things. I worry about the progress report on NSFAS, because you were supposed to have a progress report on the number of students that are eligible for receiving loans through NSFAS, right? And that will dictate where we go moving forward. But then the progress report was not developed as planned. So I'm worried about how we are going into the next academic year. And we've announced that we are ready to do this thing, but yet our progress reports are still lagging behind. That's a worry. That for me, there's a mismatch in the system. The second worry I have financially is about the culture of fiscal dumping that you see generally, where you have, for example, So for example, when you look at the expenditure trends of quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 on capital expenditure in particular, you are very, very low. You're at 4.3, then you're 5, then 17, and then boom, 100 in the last quarter. That to me is a clear indication of fiscal dumping, where the expenditure, the capital expenditure is not aligned to targets, but we wait until, in fear of Treasury coming back to say you have underspent, we've all of a sudden spent from 17% to 100%. That is an alarm for me, and that's a culture that must change.
Yeah, DG, again, the response we're giving to Honorable Khakhau about the transfer of ownership, it doesn't make sense. You are saying you had planned on behalf of, and this is what I was saying earlier, the Deputy Minister, you had made plans on behalf of UniZulu between yourself and Public Works about the old Parliament of KwaZulu-Natal in Ulundi without them. Then when you want to implement, they say no, this project will be better if it's built here in our own land. Which shows what we are telling you, that you can't plan for us without us. You, as the department, you make plans. And we always ask you, how smart are these, how measurable, how achievable are these plans of yours? So what you have just said now actually confirms what the criticism we've given you on your current plans of 25-26, that they don't make sense in a lot of times. And when we do so, you guys criticize us of criticizing you unfairly. But you've just confirmed that you guys had big plans about UniZulu without UniZulu. And then when you went to them, which again, your casual reporting does not help, because it does not even show, you make plans in April. And then here you don't tell us when did you go to them, because you might have went to them in February, because you have realized you've got this much money, which is what Honorable Khakhau speaks about. You've got this much money that you're supposed to spend. You don't know what to do with it now. You now want to spend it as soon as possible. So the planning part, I still repeat, the planning part is not assisting. Because planning, you can't plan for, you'll see when I come to my questions, on the 4 institutions that were supposed to build 5,000 accommodation on. Your own admission, you are saying they've pulled out because they are saying they don't have the money that you want them to bring to get the money that you are bringing. Because you've planned for them without them. If you had planned with them, they would have said, you could have said, okay, we want to build in Newcastle, Majuba TVET. But Majuba says, I don't have that money. Then you then decide, is it feasible to take 4? Maybe let me take 2 and build in 2, so that the project continues. The 5,000 we get, but instead of it going to 4, it goes to 2. But because you take 5,000 to 4, but you only build 2,500. But if you had taken this 5,000 to 2 institutions, you probably would have finished. So your planning leaves a lot to be desired. Honorable Christians? Well, maybe before, Honorable DG, there's an issue of the planning on NSFAS. It might have been a comment, but please respond to the fiscal dumping part of it. CFO, if you can just respond to those 2 things.
Would you like to take that one? Okay. CFO will take that.
Thanks, Chair. I think the best way of doing it properly, Chair, is to give a total breakdown of that phenomenon so that we can see exactly, what was the expenditure for the first 3 quarters, it being that low, and then the spike in the last quarter. I have got an inclination, but we'd rather not speak the inclination, Chair. I am prepared to give then a report on exactly what was the reason for that spike, on what was specifically procured in that last quarter on capital expenditure, Chair, if you permit. Thanks. Okay. Sorry, Chair, I'm saying, with your permission, I know I've got an inclination of the expenditure for the first 3 quarters and what been the spike, but we rather submit a report to exactly what was procured in the last quarter that resulted in the total expenditure of 100%, so that one can see what the difference is between the first 3 quarters and the last quarter by the means of a report, or the full report of what we procured and what was the amounts that was allocated to that, Chair. Thanks.
Now that you are on the platform, there was a point, Honorable Khakhau said earlier on, it was also a comment, and I think now that you're on the platform, you must comment on it. That in the previous financial years, you had said to us that you can't get specific groupings to achieve the target of youth businesses, businesses owned by young people, people with disabilities, women, and all of that. And you said it's because the system that you use may not have enough people. You'll go source with other departments. Take us through what have you done in this financial year to change that particular narrative, that you don't have people with disabilities businesses because they're not on the CSD, or youth-owned, women-owned, and all of that businesses. It was not a question to you, but it was a comment that came from a frustration. Comment on that.
Thanks, Chair. To start off with, Chair, I think I've in the last indicated how we apply the procurement, which is from the CSD predominantly. So what we do, we only have control over like I said, in terms of the quotation system. Tenders, they're quite out of our control because whoever submits, that's what we deal with. But with quotations, we do the selection from the CSD. And there were specific challenges that we had last year. Was predominantly, I think, the youth and people with disabilities. So we have subsequently, like I had indicated earlier, have had a meeting more than once in this last year and also now in this financial year with the Chief Directorate responsible for in the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities to understand, what it would be for us to change in terms of what we are doing so that we can reach our targets. The one thing that they have indicated to us was, amongst others, they do have a database, for example, of people, if I speak about people with disabilities. However, that database that they would have does not necessarily mean that these are people who are registered on the CSD. So our request to them was, can you give us that specific database so that we can work with that? Because the one thing that we do have wanted to make is to have an arrangement and to speak to and consult these groups, Chair, because people register themselves on the CSD. The second meeting that we had was with National Treasury because the Department of Women, Youth and Disability said to us, but you've got to consult the National Treasury, who are the custodians of the CSD, to understand what is the makeup of it, of those categories. And we've had that meeting with the Chief Director who's responsible for the supplier database of National Treasury. And the information that we collected from them is that they have had a presentation which they provided to us, is that less than 1% of the CSD, in fact, people with disabilities constitute less than 1% of the CSD. So we had said, if that's the scenario, then it would be challenging for most departments to reach that, unless we do one of the followings. We identify these people with disabilities and we would frequently procure from them. That would be some of the challenge that we have. The allocation of points and final award of a service provider is still to an extent where whoever achieves the highest points. So if you have, for example, in a group of 10 that you've collected and 7 of them are people with disabilities, the final points that you calculate is because of what their pricing is, which constitute 80% of the points. And 20% is only allocated to the specific goals. It may then still happen that the 30% of the 70 of the 100 would then could also still be appointed, and that's part and parcel of the challenge. I think the phenomenon that we experienced last year, Chair, is that we find that within the quarters, out of the 5 targets, we were able to meet 3 to 4 targets, and there were always 1 or 2 that we couldn't meet. In the next quarter, it's just the reverse. At the end of that financial year, then we would find it collates to the total amount that we could achieve. So our next move, Chair, is to really have an open day with people with disabilities, especially, and with youth, so that they also, compete. Because many times they are also non-responsive to our request for quotations, Chair. That is the update that I can present, Chair. Thanks.